The one series in the playoffs that goes to Game 7 in Round 1 is the Magic vs. Cavs series, and this series is one I think I've learned a lot about a few of the young players. Guys like Paolo Banchero have some flashes of future superstardom, Franz Wagner has some flashes of being an absolute star in his own right, but one player that has really stood out to me for more wrong reasons than right reasons has been Cavaliers' big Evan Mobley. Mobley entered the NBA and made an immediate impact that had fans excited about his upside to be one of the next great big men, and while he has shown incredible ability, I've always been skeptical of him as a player. Not to say he's a bad player, he's a very good one, but I have noticed limitations that might hold him back from truly ever being the player some believe he can be. But quickly before we go any further, if you're new and like basketball, I'd really appreciate if you would like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. I'm notified whenever I release a video. I make videos about basketball all the time, and liking and subscribing are the two best ways can help me on the YouTube algorithm, help support the channel, and help me reach my goal of 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Let's try and get 100 likes on this video so YouTube will recommend it to others. Anyways, let's talk about Evan Mobley. One of the things I've noticed the most with Mobley that has made me skeptical of him reaching some of the outcomes that people have suggested he could reach is the lack of scoring outside of at the rim. Through the first 3 seasons of his NBA career, Mobley isn't a very effective scorer outside of at the rim. He shot 29.6% on 5.4 attempts per game outside of at the rim for his career. Now, this season he did see improvement. He shot 38.6% on 4.4 attempts per game outside of the rim, but it's really hard not to compare him to other young bigs. In fact, his numbers in general outside of at the rim are closer to 2 other young bigs in what they're doing as just 3-point shooters. Victor Wembanyama shot 32.5% on 5.5 3-point attempts per game, while Chet Holmgren shot 37% on 4.3 3-point attempts per game. So those are 2 players from a field goal perspective, from a volume perspective, that are as good, if not better, or at least close to what Mobley's doing outside of at the rim in general, but that's just what they're doing as 3-point shooters. On top of that, through the first 6 playoff games of this season for the Cavs, Mobley has been abysmal outside of at the rim, shooting just 28.2% on 4.6 attempts per game outside of the rim in these playoffs. He also shot 19% on 4.2 attempts per game outside of the rim in the playoffs last season. In the modern NBA, there is a standard in terms of high-end outcomes when it comes to scoring ability. Being able to showcase ability to score on all 3 levels of the court is almost a requirement for the best players in the NBA, even at the power forward and center spots. Victor Wembanyama, Chet Holmgren, Paolo Banchero, Jaren Jackson Jr., Julius Randle, Karl-Anthony Towns, Lauri Markkanen, just to name a few. Even guys like Anthony Davis are taking more shots outside of at the rim. And that's not even getting into guys like Jokic or Embiid. Unless you're a guy like Zion, being able to score outside the paint is a vital part of reaching high-end offensive outcomes, and Mobley just hasn't proved that. I don't think he's a complete lost cause. His free throw numbers are getting better every year, and the shot touch is encouraging, but it's not nearly enough for me to put him in the same category as other young bigs and forwards like Wemby, Chet, or Paolo. And the thing that always has held me back from seeing Mobley as this future superstar like some believed he could be is about more than just a lack of scoring effectiveness outside of at the rim, because he's never been an effective scorer in terms of being aggressive and a go-to guy. I think he's proven he can be very productive. 15.6 points per game on a 58.42 shooting percentage through his first 3 NBA seasons is far from bad, but he's never been wired as a big-time scorer. In my research for this video, he's only averaged over 20 points per game once at any level prior to the NBA, and that was his senior year of high school. He's never had bad production by any means. He's actually had pretty good production, but as someone who's been watching him since high school, he's never really been a guy that's naturally just wired to take over a game. When he was the go-to option, it felt more like he was 7 feet tall and just better than everyone else at the high school level for the most part. But I'm also not going to act like he didn't show some flashes in college. He led USC in scoring despite not leading them in field goal attempts, as well as not being the focal point of the offense. It never felt like they were running it for him. So there was some hope that he was just being held back by the system. But so far in the NBA, he hasn't proven to be a player that you can confidently project to reach scoring outcomes like Wembanyama, Chet, or Paolo, which is why I'm lower on him compared to those three. Now, does this make Mobley a bad player? No, it doesn't. Like I said in the intro, Mobley is still a very good player, because even with a lack of perimeter scoring and scoring aggression, he still does a lot of things very well. He's a very good scorer at the rim. He's at 70.5% at the rim on 6.6 attempts per game this season, putting him in the 95th percentile for rim volume and 88th percentile for rim efficiency. For his career, he shoots 71.7% at the rim on 6.2 attempts per game. This is clearly an area he's very effective. He has fluid movement skills, runs the floor well, he's great athletically in terms of being a roll man, he has the handle to occasionally attack on the ball, but he does thrive most as a play finisher, hovering around the low to mid 70s in terms of percentage of rim production assisted on, so that suggests a high level play finisher that can somewhat attack on the ball as well, which the tape does back up. While it may not be flashy or eye-popping in terms of production and how it's being produced, play finishing is still very valuable. It's still something that allows a player to thrive next to creators, and Mobley has shown he can be a very effective one. I also really like Mobley as a playmaker. He is more of a connector, I would say, than a primary. If he was a primary, I wouldn't even be making this video, because even if he isn't an elite scorer, his scoring production is good enough to suggest a superstar outcome if he was able to be a primary playmaker, but that isn't the case. Regardless, it doesn't take away from how effective he is either. His handle is very solid, his vision and feel are very good, he makes good reads, he averages just 0.5 bad pass turnovers per game, so he's not turning the basketball over a lot, if at all, when he makes decisions as a passer. He's unselfish, almost to a fault, but he doesn't hurt offensive flow by being a ball stopper, which is important. Having an effective play finisher that makes good reads is very valuable. A guy who may not make those around him better and elevate the team around him, but has playmaking ability that is a positive for the offense. It does make Mobley more than just a one-dimensional offensive player, and while he may not be a good shooter, it does make him a versatile offensive player. One that can work in many lineups, making him very flexible in terms of team building, both short-term and long-term. And there's no doubt about it, Mobley is one of the best defensive players in the NBA, as well as one of the best young defensive players we have ever seen. He finished top 3 in Defensive Player of the Year voting in just his second NBA season. He's played at an all-defense level since his rookie season, and while he didn't play enough games to likely make all-defense this season, he still was in the 94th percentile in terms of defensive estimated plus minus. Even in these playoffs, he's shown to be a monster on defense. Through 6 games when Mobley is on the court, the Cavs have a 104.1 defensive rating. For context, if the Cavs did that for a whole season, they would be by far the best defense in the NBA. But when he's off the court in these playoffs, the Cavs have a 117.7 defensive rating. For context, that would be the 23rd ranked defensive rating in the NBA over a full season. The defense is the area I agree most with Mobley fans on. He's truly special in this area. He's a good shot blocker with decent foul discipline. He's versatile, can play any defensive coverage. His feel for the game is off the charts. He communicates well on defense, has a great motor. The only thing that hurts him is the physicality on post-ups, but his defense is about more than just 1v1 the block, and it doesn't take away from the fact he's an absolute monster in every other area of defense. He's one of the 3 to 5 best defensive players in the world, in my opinion. He's one of those players I think is so great defensively that on its own, it makes him a borderline all-star level player. I think he's someone that will be in the running for Defensive Player of the Year for his entire prime, barring health. He was my pick to win it this season going into it. He has a combination of feel, athleticism, and technical ability that makes him a monster on that end of the court and someone you can build a defense around. Evan Mobley is a classic case of being overrated by some, but still very good. I don't think he's the next Joel Embiid or Nikola Jokic. I don't even have him in the same tier as guys like Wemby, Chet, or Paolo. But he still is very good. He's one of the best defensive players in the world and still a productive and efficient offensive player. Even if the ceiling isn't the highest in terms of he could maybe be the best player in the world, I don't really see that. I still see All-Star to Fringe All-NBA upside here. Now, to be clear, if he was just a good play finisher, connecting passer, and also could attack on the ball sometimes, but was still limited, I wouldn't be saying this. But when you combine what he does offensively with the defense, you get a very good player. Maybe not a future MVP or superstar, but still someone that's a star. I think Mobley will be this generation's version of Rudy Gobert. I think his offensive ceiling is higher than Gobert due to the handle and playmaking, but I see Mobley being an effective offensive player, but not the guy you build your offense around, the same way I feel about Gobert. But he is a monster defender that can be your anchor. Gobert is a player that is better than many, including myself, want to admit. He's going to be a Hall of Famer as one of the best defensive players ever. He hovers around the mid-20s to early 30s among best players in the league because of how much of an impact he makes defensively. And at his best, the defense is so good and he's competent enough offensively that he's even in discussions for 15 to 20 range in terms of best players in the league. And I see Mobley in that regard in terms of ceiling. I think offensively, he will be a bit better than Gobert. A really efficient 16 to 18 point per game scorer, grabs around 10 rebounds per game, averages around 3 to 5 assists per game, while also being Defensive Player of the Year caliber year in and year out, and probably will win at least one or two at some point in his career. That's an all-star in this league. Depending on how good his team is, that's a fringe All-NBA level guy in this league, and someone that was worth taking top 3 in the draft. Just because he's not an offensive talent you can build around doesn't mean he isn't a valuable player. Because having a player on offense that can thrive next to creators as a scorer and passer is still very valuable. But I also think that when you combine that with defense, you're still going to get an incredible player. At the same time, I think the talks about his ceiling are finally beginning to trend towards becoming more realistic. At least I hope. But that's the end of this video. If you made it to this point, thank you so much. Again, haven't already, like, subscribe, hit notification bell, notify whenever I release a video. I'm making videos about basketball all the time, and liking and subscribing are the two best ways can help me out the YouTube algorithm, help support the channel, and I'll be reaching my goal of 10,000 subscribers by the end of the season. I'd love to hear your thoughts below about Evan Mobley. Do you think his ceiling is higher than I do? Do you think it's lower? What do you think his ceiling is in general? If you're watching this before Game 7, who do you think is going to win? Cavs or Magic? Do either of these teams stand a chance against Boston? Love to do all that down below. But with that being said, have a nice day, and I'll see you guys in the next one.